You see, the question that I actually wondered about, if you look at this, the value chain in the tea industry, okay, we have the farmer, everybody knows about the farmer. Then you have the tea factories, we understand that one. Then there are those in between.
And then there's KTDA.
Okay? That has morphed over the years. Began as this, turned out to be the other, and is now currently this. And KTDA has had its own issues. But then you have tea brokers. You have people who represent tea companies. Then there's the companies themselves. Now, what I have wondered, even as those who are on the other side of this particular discussion now, this divide, even as they've put forward their argument, I have not heard a convincing argument that actually tells me how it is that the farmer benefits as much as everybody else who's involved in this particular trade. Because really, in the absence of the farmer, everybody else would have no work to do. If these people don't produce their tea, what are you going to do?
Exactly.
So what is this thing? You have a warehouse. What are you going to warehouse in your warehouse?
Okay.
What are you going to sell? What is this thing that you likely end up doing? This tea discussion is an important one, and perhaps what the Senate has done is something that could be argued has been long overdue. Yes. And those who have issues with it should bring it up so that we can understand what their beef is and what their arguments are. Yes.
I get a feeling that what has happened in this is the conversation akin to what we are being told about the BBI, akin to what happened in 2010. Yes, we understand that this has gains. We also understand that there are some shortcomings, but let's take the gains and then we'll deal with the 20% later.
Yes.
When you hear some of these conversations, you get that sort of feeling. That
you do.
There's some serious disquiet about the proposals herein. Are these objections being raised by the people who are benefiting from the status quo, or are they being raised by people who really look at it and they think that there's going to be benefit out of this?
And even if those who benefit from the status quo, you see, the discussion zeroes down to something very simple. Does the farmer benefit as much as they should?
The bottom line, right?
Bottom line.
Should be the most
once we've had this discussion and gone around it several times, it's a question that must be answered. Yes.
Let's bring in our guests this morning. We have two guests. One of them is the Kericho Senator, Cheruiyot, and the other one is Irungu Nyakera. Irungu has spoken to us before about the push for tea sector reforms. Irungu is the chair of the tea sector lobby and is also the chair of the political parties liaison committee. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Eric and the team.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good.
Asante sana for joining us. So let's start with you, Senator. This conversation happened in the Senate, and this appeared to have been, getting to a point where senators at some point were not in agreement with one another on what way to go in terms of voting for this particular bill. Just take us through the thinking of various senators, including yourself, when it came now to the passage of this bill on Monday.
Well, Eric, this is a journey that we began in 2018. I then moved a motion on the floor of the House for the House to create a select committee that will look into the challenges in the tea subsector in our republic. The House agreed with me. We formed a select committee of 9 members. We toured 14 counties and listened to tea farmers. We came back to Nairobi and listened to the rest of the players, the brokers, the transporters, the factory owners, tea managing agents, and basically everybody else on the food chain. Then we came up with the tea bill, which I sponsored, and it took us a bit of time because of this push and pull that you're talking about right now, where there appears to be conflicting schools of thoughts on what is the best thing to do for the sector. By mid-2019, we had concluded our work and we passed the bill as Senate Bill number 36 of 2018, and it was sent to the Assembly. That happened to be the time where we had the push and pull between bills concerning counties and money bills, all that discussion, if you do remember, between us and the National Assembly. So it was caught up in purgatory, so to speak, for some time. And there was all this discussion saying, oh no, Senate doesn't have the powers to do what you want to do. But somehow, over time, with a lot of work on the back room, the National Assembly came back to their senses and accepted that they will process the bill. So work on the bill began also around towards the end of 2019. And they did their first reading, public participation, and the rest of the things. But then you do recall that towards the beginning of this year, the president spoke on the need for reforms in the tea sector.
Yep.
And he tasked his cabinet secretary, C.S. Munya, to initiate the reforms. And therefore the minister came up with regulations, tea sector regulations, and he set up also a steering committee. Many of those in the tea sub-sector, a good number, those that have been benefiting from many of the things that happened there that are not right, obviously will not be happy with this move. So they went to court and they stopped the implementation of the regulations. They also stopped the task force from commencing its work. At that time, there wasn't much controversy with the tea bill because basically what the bill was doing was number one, in 2012, Parliament passed a law that amalgamated all crops under the leadership of a body called AFA. And that is one of the gravest mistakes that we made at that particular time, because you see, you're combining crops that are doing well with some that are in their graveyards.
Yep.
Number two, you're imagining that you can get a board of people that understand the whole crop subsector in the country. They understand about tea, they understand about sugar, they understand about coffee, pyrethrum, name it all. And when they sit down, they can generate a policy framework of how to revive the sector. That's not possible. Every sector is very unique with its own challenges and expertise, and therefore requires their own standalone board that will address many of the emerging issues. So basically, one of the things that the bill is doing is to get tea away from AFA and create the Tea Board of Kenya and give it regulatory powers as such that it will regulate everyone in the tea sector. Because it was clear from our discussion that everyone was being allowed to run around and do whatever they will with the gains of the farmer. The brokers in Mombasa, they deduct as much as they want. The guys in the warehouse, they deduct their portion. The managing agents, the factory managing agents, they deduct. The transporters. Then finally, by the time whatever had been realized gets to the farmer, everybody has had the budget. Very little is left for the farmer who has toiled so hard about it. So we realized these are the signs of a sector that doesn't have a good regulator. And that is why we proposed that Tea Board of Kenya should have good regulatory powers and the rest. So basically, by and large, that was majorly what was in the bill, alongside other reorganizations and Tea Research Institute as well, which we realized that having been also put together under the same structure such as AFA, but with the rest of the agriculture subsector research institutes, it was suffering. We went to Kericho, where the Tea Research Institute is headquartered, and they told us for the last 6 years, the only thing they've received is salaries. They haven't conducted any research. They haven't bought anything, not even a pen.
Why was that?
Because, once you're amalgamated together with the rest of all these other crops, it depends on where the interest is. There has always been this clamor about sugar, about all these other sectors. So people imagine that since you guys are doing well, please hold on for a while. Let us sort the guys who are in more dire situation. But the mistake that brought is that they are not able to generate new clones of tea that will respond and give the farmer better yield. Most of our small scale holders, the tea plants they use tea bushes that were planted by their grandfathers mostly. These are clones of the 50s and the 60s. Yet research has given better clone. If you go to the multinational estates, for those of us that come from Kericho, every 10 to 20 years, they completely clear off the bush and plant a new one, and in between, by 3 years maximum, they are already harvesting from that crop and better yield. So there is a science to it that our farmers don't get to benefit from because of how Tea Research Institute had been managed. So we also took it back and created the mechanisms of how to fund it. But then, remember, don't lose the fact that I told you regulations were running into trouble with the rest of governors and everyone. So basically, there was a discussion. It was agreed that since the bill is progressing and the grounds upon which the regulations and the committee was being contested was that there hasn't been sufficient public participation.
Mm-hmm.
So the government then made a decision and said, okay, we could pick a good number of what we considered are very critical issues to be addressed by the regulations and include them into the bill, have people react to it, then it becomes law. So basically, that is what happened. Ministry of Agriculture came and did a presentation before the Agriculture Committee of the National Assembly. And they proposed, they added so many of the regulations that they had proposed in the earlier regulation that had been controversially taken to court, rejected by Senate. It was running into a lot of headwinds. And that was it. The National Assembly agreed with many of them. The bill about last month was forwarded back to the Senate because that's a legislative procedure. The bill must complete its journey. It must always go back to the House it originated from, especially where there have been changes, so that they concur to the changes or there's mediation. So when we were presented with this bill, that's when now the situation you were presenting earlier arose, where people felt that there have been too much changes. They don't imagine it's to the benefit of the farmer on some of them. But then this is the practical decision that we had to make. We understand how difficult it is to push a legislation through both houses right now because of the prevailing situation and bad blood between the two houses. You know, there are about 28 bills that the High Court quashed for want of procedure. And therefore, if we had tried to tinker with the T-bill and say, oh, we don't agree with what you guys have done here, and then you begin the whole mediation process, again, we would have lost many of those gains.
But the bill that came back to the Senate, was it very different from the bill that had been proposed, that you had proposed initially?
Yes.
Were there fundamental differences?
Not fundamental differences. It was additional. The thinking and the structure of the bill still remained as had been proposed by the Senate. Move Tea from AFA to have a standalone board of its own, Tea Research Institute. The only other major thing that they did is that now they created a tea stabilization fund, which is something as Senate we wouldn't have done, because had we done that, then clearly the bill will have gone afoul of Article 110 of our Constitution, which is, it would have become a money bill, if you understand that particular issue and the debate about it. So they created this particular fund, which means that's the fund which over time government needs to continue to fund and give the resources to be able to carry out marketing, because one of the challenges that we have is that while we have internal structures within the country, we haven't looked also for new markets for our tea. We are relying on the traditional markets of Pakistan, Iran, Britain, America, and
you've left Egypt.
And Egypt, actually, you know, and the consumption of black tea, which is largely what we produce, about 80% of our tea, is not growing. The demand is not growing globally.
Which there's a question I'd like to ask. If I look at the tea sector and everything that goes with it, and we look at the production of tea in this country, what percentage of our tea is actually produced by the small-scale farmer?
It's about 60%.
So what you're saying
60
is
to
that
65.
65%. All right. And who do they rely on for support? The government themselves, the big tea companies. Who actually do they rely on for the support?
There is very little government support. They rely on the managing agents, like KTDA is the largest. and the multinationals, and then the private factory owners. There are three people actually that they sell their tea to. Largely, about 60% of it goes to KTDA. About another 20% goes to the multinationals. That's the James Finlays, the Unilevers. I forget the names of the others. Brookbond is now Unilever.
Brookbond is now Unilever.
Yeah, George Williamson,
Yes.
Yeah.
They take their tea to those multinationals. Alternatively, there is an emerging group of small cottage industry, private factory owners. These are guys with one or two factories.
So what role does the East African Tea Trade Association play in all this?
East African Tea Trade Association is the association that runs the tea auction. It's an association that brings together buyers from the various East African countries: Kenya, Tanzania, Burundi, Rwanda, Tanzania. There's one other that I'm forgetting, where they all bring their tea to this auction, and then the various buyers compete to buy our tea, and they sell it. There is a problem also therein, because we sell our tea as a raw product, and that's a challenge. Of course, it has little to do with us and a lot to do with global trade and the bulldozing that the big power players of the world actually do with this regard. Because if we were to process our tea to completion and package it, and you're expecting that they'll go and put it in Tesla or Walmart, they will never do it. They want to buy it as Liptons or Twinings, then they go and process it. Not actually, there's nothing to process. It's the repackaging.
Mheshimiwa, is this something that prevents us from this value addition process? Is this something that actually prevents us from doing it?
The demands of the market, Latif, is not as easy.
No, this is CT Muga. Latif is the other guy you were talking to before.
Oh,
yes.
Muga, sorry. Now I can't see you guys, so I have to rely on my. This is why next year we pray that instead of sending us BBI books, they'll send us vaccines.
Right.
So that you're able to meet physically. Yeah. So your question was, is there anything specifically that prevents us?
Yes.
It's the end user in the market. If you package your tea and call it, say, spice tea, and it's on the shelf in the big market sectors, the Egypts and the Pakistans, and nobody knows about us. It's something that we have to do in the long run, but it must be a phased process. You must begin slowly by slowly, package it, partner with other emerging companies. Tea, just like coffee, is a sector that is controlled by a small group of players who are unfortunately very powerful globally. If they bypass you, you'll remain with your tea at the auction. And that is the undoing that farmers have had to do with. That's why we have to sell our tea as is. Then they just go and do the packaging, and they gain more value actually. They'll sell it for 3 times the price of what we sell that tea to them. So that's why you need this particular tea fund. That should be their work now, to ensure that one, value addition begins as a first process. The challenge is it's expensive. It's expensive to put up a product and market it. It takes years until people begin to appreciate what it is. It's not that it can't be done, but it takes you time. It's like just the launch of any other particular product. Let's say if you want to launch a line of soft drink to take on, say, Coca-Cola or Pepsi. You can't say that it's impossible, but you know what you're up against.
Irungu, to bring you in there now, when you heard the news of this having passed over the last couple of over the many hours, what was your initial reaction based on the conversations that we had with you a few weeks ago in terms of what you wanted to see when it came to the regulation of this sector in the country? What does this mean now on the ground?
First, it will be we're actually very elated because it's a journey that we've been for a very long time, almost 2 years from our end, as the senator has explained how the whole process was. I think for us, we were more on the tea regulation side, as the senator was holding on the tea bill. And the regulations are the ones that when the president spoke on January 14th, he laid out what needs to happen in the tea subsector. And he didn't say it from what his own policymakers and the others. It's actually from the farmers, the things that the farmers wanted to happen in the subsector so that they could start getting better returns and they could feel that they're in control of their crop. And so from there, the minister formed a team, then gazetted on June 29th, gazetted the regulations, and immediately KTDA, IATA, everyone, all these players went to court to stop the regulations. But then the Parliament, the National Assembly, a committee on delegated legislation passed these regulations. Somehow the Senate came in and they rejected the regulations, and that's how those regulations were merged with the T bill, because some of those issues were so critical. It felt that if we don't have them in the T bill, then we'll have to have the T bill passed and then now start creating regulations for the T Act, which again are these same items. So it will have been a very long process, and that's why from the farmer side, the passing of the T bill was actually a huge sigh of relief, offered them a huge sigh of relief. You can imagine a sector where tea in 2012 at the auction was selling at $3.2, and today in 2020, 8 years later, it's at $2. So despite the inflation and all these other challenges that have happened, the cost of living going up, the tea is down. The price is down by over 50% over the 8 years. So you can imagine also the farmers asking themselves, is it sustainable? Can we continue farming? So status quo, and for those people who are holding for status quo, was not going to work. Yeah, something needed to be done, and that's what the Senate has mentioned. Things like on the how are we marketing our tea? 55% of our tea is sold to Egypt and Pakistan. Yeah, Pakistan had a huge devaluation of their currency the other day, so they can still buy at the old prices, but on dollar rate it's coming down. Egypt has an issue with that because of COMESA, taxation on COMESA. So again, our tea, you find that it's in containers in high seas. So we are not looking for new markets. Yeah, out of the 480 million kilograms of tea sold, only 2 million was sold to America. Yeah, that's 0.000% that's being sold there.
Mr. Irungu, how would you explain this decline in the value of tea or the cost of tea?
You see, there are many reasons to that. One is, as I'm saying, the aspect of tea research that the senator spoke on. That as soon as all these changes came and tea research was taken to Calro, there was no funding, so there is no research on the quality of our tea, on how to improve that quality, on how to improve output and all that. Secondly, the marketing. We are not looking for new markets. So we are going to the same traditional markets. I was giving an example. If you have this cow that produces 10 liters of milk, and you have a hotel that you sell this milk to, when this cow starts producing 20 liters, if you don't find a new hotel to sell to, this old hotel will tell you we'll buy at half price because it's now have double. And that's what we've been doing. We've not been looking for new markets so that we can make our commodity the match of the demand and supply. So we've just been complaining there's more demand, there's more supply, so the prices keeps coming down. Thirdly, and this is what has been addressed by the T bill, is the issue of manipulation at the auction, because about 20% of the tea is sold through direct sales, and The other 80% is, of course, at the auction. But I know of a case of a certain broker last year who sold about 19 billion in the auction of the tea. And they were in cahoots at some point with KTDA so that they can depress those market prices, because the prices at the auctions are the ones that are used to sell the direct sales. So the lower the prices in the auction, the lower the prices for the direct sales. And these direct sales, you can imagine, these are people who they know each other. So the lower it is, the better for them. They know how they deal after that. So those are the things that have led to this tea bill pushing and outlawing direct sales and having that all these sales will go through auction. Of course, there are people who are complaining, and people, your multilaterals, your private factories, and all the others are complaining that they shouldn't be forced to sell through the auction. But Sri Lanka and Rwanda, all those sell 100% through auction. So we are not the first country to do that.
Let's take a break. The conversation continues. We're talking about tea sector reforms. And joining us on the line this morning is Kericho Senator Aaron Cheruiyot and Irungu Nyakera, chair of the tea sector lobby. Aaron, there's a message that's coming from you from social media from Collins Korir. It says, Salimia, my senator, Elias Kiptoyot.
Good. Mwambie nimesalimika. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Irungu, there's something I'd like to ask. Even as you talked about the depressing, the depressed price, not depressing, I guess it's depressing for the farmer, yes, of our tea. Have we taken into consideration the competition for our tea? I ask this because, one, there are countries, a country like Ceylon, it's actually now called Sri Lanka, for the longest time was at war with itself. And they're also a major tea producing country. Now, when that war ceded, they went back to the international market with their tea. There are countries like Vietnam who've also become tea producing areas. How do we favor, how does our tea favorably compete with the other teas that come from other parts of the world?
You see, the issue is, of course, on the market. Our tea, as they say, is actually premium tea. So it's much better than your Vietnam and your India and all these teas. So if you take an example of Sri Lanka, they sell 55% of their tea value added through Ceylon. Kenya, we sell 2% of our tea value added. And look at a place like Rwanda. Rwanda, their tea sells at almost 3 times the price of ours. Our soils are the same. We've been at it for longer. So it's really an issue of marketing. How do we market? The other time we had the chairman of KTDA said that the reason they don't market as hard is because government does not give them money for marketing. But then they have another 400 billion shillings every year for legal cases. So the question is, where is their priority? Yeah. Why is it that our tea is not being sold in Turkey? They're huge takers of tea. We are not looking at the emerging markets in Africa, your Angola, your DRC, your South African countries. We are not selling there. We are not selling the US. We are selling the US.
Mr. Irungu, who owns KTDA?
KTDA is owned by the factories, but run by cartels.
So why should the government give them money to market?
Exactly. They deduct 2.5% from farmers, from factories every year. That's about 3-4 billion that they take from farmers every year. But from there, they cannot take out 100-200 million as per the task force report that they've had in 2007 to 2016. It has said value addition and marketing. Those are the two things that we have to do for us to deliver the higher prices for farmers. So it's the fact that we are the people there are very comfortable with the what they are doing, and that's why you could hear the MD telling farmers that the prices are here to stay. If anyone is unhappy with it, they can uproot their tea. You see, that's the wrong mentality, the wrong attitude. That when the KTDA does not have a marketing department, you're selling 500 million kilograms of tea and you don't have a marketing department. So there's no focus on marketing, and that's why our prices at $2 today, they'll be at $1 tomorrow.
This speaks about then even corporate management at national level and even the factory level. And I'm sure, like you said, Senator, when the Senate formed this select committee and it went round the 14 counties and spoke to the various stakeholders, did this emerge as an issue about how the factories are being managed, how the factories and KTDA are relating, and how KTDA itself is being managed? Let's speak about corporate governance.
It was a big issue, I can tell you, because they feel that for a long time, KTDA has grown to be big enough to the point where they enjoy a monopoly. And you know how monopolistic institutions behave. They tend to become deaf to the needs of their customers and their clients. And that happened in a big way because farmers felt that there are things that there was a lot of lack of transparency in how their factories are run. That one, here comes KTDA, they tell you that we are managing agent, so you pay them a percentage, and you think that for all the services that they'll give you, it will be catered for by that management fee that you pay, the 2.5%. But to the shock of farmers, every time KTDA does the simplest of duties to the individual factories, they always receive an invoice. If there is a case against, say, a particular factory and KTDA sends their legal department, there'll be a separate invoice for that. If one of their machines, say, was to have a challenge and they send in consultants, there'll be a separate bill to that. When KTDA sends managers to the various factories, and they sure do that because that's part of their work, you'd believe that that should be subsumed into the management fee.
2.5, yes.
In the 2.5, but unfortunately, farmers are still billed for those managers. And therefore, farmers felt that there is a lot of things that are shrouded in mystery. You know, you must remember the history of KTDA, Eric, that this, first of all, used to be a parastatal. Before government, through a legal notice in the year 2000, thought that privatizing it will be the best way. And it's a model that has worked. Don't get us wrong that you're saying that we need to kill this particular institution. There is good value for what they do for farmers, but they need a lot of shake-up. That's why one of the proposals in the bill is that the maximum amount of management fee that you are allowed to charge at a private public tea factory is 1.5%. What are we forcing them to do? We are forcing them to innovate. We are telling them reduce on your cost. We are telling them leverage on the use of ICT to ensure that you bring down the cost of running these factories so that 1.5% is enough for you and your staff and all the operations that needs to be done in the factories. We are also opening up the market such that if there are people who can compete with them, it will not be a small exercise because they have a almost 40, 50-year advantage ahead of anyone who would wish to start. But we have closed the avenues for them to exploit farmers. There are certain parameters within which they cannot go beyond, which is, you remember our earlier discussion, that this is a sector that needed a lot of regulation so that you protect the gains of the farmer.
So how do you deal with the monopolistic state of KTDA? Do you allow other players to come in and compete directly with what KTDA is doing?
Exactly. There's no other way. There is absolutely no other way. It will take time. Farmers will have to be enlightened because, you know, many of the farmers don't understand that they even own the factories. You know, you'll hear them call their own factory KTDA factory.
Yep.
You know, that's how big is the Omo and the washing powder story in the market. You know, give me Lipatie Omo area, that kind of thing. It's their own factory, but
theirs.
Because they've had one managing agent for 50 years, they call their own factory by the name of the managing agent. So it will take a lot of learning for them to understand the corporate governance structure, that you actually elect your directors. And once you've elected, and there's a whole debate about the classification of shares. that will be a big one also, and I foresee that will go all the way to the Supreme Court. You know, like for me, the factory next home is a factory called Chemamul. I have the founding shares that my grandfather had. I carried them in my car during the last 2 years, because when I went home and inquired about how did we began taking tea to this factory, and I was given the story about what happened and all those. But, you know, that no longer holds any value. What is of value and how the model that is now used to determine the leadership at that factory is how much produce you take to that particular processor. As such that if I take 10,000 kgs and Nyakera was to take 500 kgs, I will have more voting rights than Irungu. But ideally, that's not what the Companies Act envisaged. You know, there's classification of shares. The Class A shares, are they transferable? Do you lose them if you stop taking your tea to that particular factory? There is a whole debate that will come up in the next few days and months. But overall, the biggest thing that we had to do was to first limit everybody, including, by the way, the guys in Mombasa, Yata, that you had earlier spoken about. Globally, people charge anywhere between 0.75 to 1% of the value of the tea that they are selling at the auction. It goes to the buyers, not to the buyers, to the guys running the auction. But in Kenya, that had moved to 1.5%, which is double of what the global average is. So the new proposal, and they are also being forced to innovate, is a maximum of 0.75%, and they are being told to run their auction electronically to stop this manual business. The reason we are forcing them to stop manual business is that you have very few buyers, maximum of 14, but the bigger ones are maybe 5 or 6. Those are guys who can sit down at breakfast in Serena Hotel in Mombasa, then they walk into the auction and they've already agreed and said, we are not paying beyond X amount today. And if any of us doesn't pay, then the small guys won't be able, because they have the purchasing power. So how do you force against this kind of conspiracy? You make sure that the auction is electronic, such that you enter your bid, all of you at the same time. And because of the demands of the market, if Irungu and I are trying to outbid each other, then despite the fact that we may have private arrangements outside, if I beat him today, then tomorrow there will not be a case of private arrangement. He will try to outbid me, and that is what sustains the auction market.
Senator, and I guess it's a question for both of you, but starting with you, Senator, this is, like you said, it's 50 years of close to no regulation. It's 50 years of the big players in the market doing essentially whatever they wanted, to the detriment of the farmers. And so now we are saying flip this thing on its head and let farmers then be the ones who benefit, because essentially they're the ones who are putting in, they're the ones with the greatest inputs. So then their interests should be protected above and beyond everybody else. Now, it's essentially an overhaul of the way in which things have been done for the longest time. I see a lot of pushback that would come from those who've benefited over time and are not ready to lose their hold on this. Even with this bill and with these recent developments, what kind of measures they're then putting in place to make sure that the factors coming in these developments are then protected through and through?
These are not small people, by the way. Make no mistake.
Yeah,
they're extremely powerful guys, by the way, and this is also not small money that you're talking about. You must remember this is the largest subsector in the country, especially now with COVID and terrorism. So tourism takes a second position, and maybe foreign direct remittances will be the only other sector that competes with the tea in terms of earnings to the country. So we are not talking about a small sector. The interest here is quite huge. And those people are not about to sit pretty and lose their piece of the cherry. I can assure you, as soon as the president signs this bill, you'll see a lot of court cases. against this, against that particular clause, this lobby group and the other. So they'll have to be concerted effort. Judiciary will have to remember also to have a good balance between private interest and the public good of the country and the interest of the tea farmer who has been exploited for the last 50 years. The president also will have to listen to their pleadings. I am certain that this is a cause he's committed to, and therefore he will be of great help to us in terms of trying to stabilize the sector. The ministry as well, because, you know, having good legislation is like having a brand new, say, computer with all the specification and the giftings. But if you don't have the technical expertise to run and do the great stuff that machine is built for, there's absolutely nothing. You can just open a Word document and type on it and close, but other people can do greater things with it.
Right.
You know? So there's still a lot of work that lies ahead of us in the coming days before the farmer can begin to realize the benefits. You know, 50 years of mismanagement. In fact, the kind of messages that I've received the last 2-3 days are people telling me that one of the things, because, you know, Kenya is Kenya, you need to do is first, you need to hit the road and educate Kenyans to understand that there's still a long way ahead. Otherwise, they imagine from the conversations that that is going on that next time or next month when they receive their monthly slip, things have changed.
Yes.
Of course, there'll be a slight increase based on the fact that we have now reduced management fee and the auction price, but it will not be as significant as maybe some are imagining. But it's something that we will prepare farmers for the long run, because I know it's not easy, but it's something that can be done.
Irungu, how soon before we start seeing changes at KTDA and the management of tea factories?
Actually, as the senator said, they had done by March, and with just the change in the management of the 1.5 from 2.5 and the brokerage, the only farmers get to gain about 2 shillings only. So that the other things are the ones which we have to push to ensure that we see that change being a lot bigger. How soon we expect this? The changes, I think one is, of course, we expect the changes from a governance side. The elections of the factories need to be conducted, and they need to be conducted under the provisions of the Act, of the new Act, which means that some of the directors who have been in KTDA for years and years currently are due for election, including the current chairman. So we do hope that they can be kicked out in the next election. And then for us to have full implementation of this, it's our hope that the court do not stop these regulations. We expect people like the governors. We've been seeing them talking about not being involved, which really is against the Schedule 4 of the Constitution. Section Item 29 provides that agriculture policy is part of national government, is not part of county government. So that governors who are involved as stakeholders. So we hope that they do not go to court. We hope that also KTDA can just understand that change has to happen. Yeah. So because we expect them to also start going to court. We hope that they will not now start using farmers' resources again to go to court opposing all this. Because once, if we all have a seat, because at the time when I was sitting with them and I told them, you cannot come and say that of all the 10 things we want and we are agitating for as farmers are bad. You cannot say 100% of the reforms that we want will not happen. You can say let's delay 10% of it or 20%, but you cannot come and rubbish everything. So we hope that they do not go, so that we can actually have real reforms being implemented. And finally, the pace of the reforms will also depend on the minister appointing the right team, because implementation is as important as the agitation that we've had. If we do not have proper implementation, we might end up even in the worst place than we were before. So we need a really good team that can shepherd this whole process all the way to the end. And for me, as a final call and on this is, I heard what the senator said at the beginning, how he actually looked at the key issues, went to the Senate, talked to the other senators, formed a committee to actually look into this. And for me, when I see tea reform, I see that we can also have reforms in all the other sectors. If it's sugar, I need to see senators from the sugar areas doing the same. If it is coffee, the people from the coffee side, you have the coffee bill and all that. So that people can start seeing their leadership working. People can start seeing that their issues, because the agriculture can be the backbone is not working. So I think for us, we are very happy to see that the issues and reforms on tea are ongoing. And it's our hope that with these reforms, we can also now start seeing other reforms in the other agriculture subsectors of tea and the others, so that at least at the end of the day, the farmer starts getting something.
Senator, I mean, even as we come to the end of this, one of the things that you mentioned previously was the value add. So we are looking at tea being produced within the country. Then it goes out, it's bought, it's mopped up by the international market, and then it's essentially sold back into the country with a different label. And also saying that value add, can't Kenyan tea then go out and be sold on the international market as Kenyan tea, right? Or at least people know the source of this tea. It seems that there's a lot of work that needs to be done within the borders of Kenya first. I mean, there's so much in terms of regulation, protection of farmers, inputs and such. So much work needs to be done before then you go to the value add part of it. Is it something that will then be taken care of by the same individuals, boards that would be appointed in the near future? Sorting out of the auction, going to digitization of the same, going across board, then can value add come in with the same people, or would we see that input would be needed to be brought in by a different set of people to talk about value add, for example? Will the boards coming in be able to handle all of this to fix the situation that's already quite bad here, and then now bring in the value add for the international markets?
Well, it is something that's doable, like I had earlier observed, but I said this is an investment for the long haul. It's not something for 1, 2, 3, or 5 years, because you're competing against very established global brands, people like Twinings, who are in the Club 100, companies that are over 100 plus years old. Therefore, for you to generate your own brand and expect to compete with them, then first of all, you need the resources to back you up. But also, fortunately, there are certain positives to it. For example, in terms of Black CTC tea, nobody produces tea better than Kenyans. We have the fortunate gifting by God of being on the equator.
Right.
So our tea enjoys more sunshine than any other tea, unless for the guys who plant tea and are along the equator line globally. So, and that there's something that does to the taste of the eventual product. And therefore, that is already a good place to start and build on. But like I had already informed, that this is something that government investment will have to play a role in also, because it's not something that you expect a private player to take what would ordinarily have been earnings for the farmer and use them to market globally. There is a symbiotic relationship. You had asked a question earlier, why should government say invest in what appears to be a private enterprise? They should, because they're the biggest gainers. If our tea gains more value and it's bought globally at a better price,
it's a good thing.
It means more taxes to the government. It means more stability to its own people. You know?
Yep.
So there is absolutely nothing wrong by government investing in these facilities to ensure that there is a good value add on our tea, and the same is sold in the global market. Of course, you rely on your connections. Ensure, if you go to other countries that have got a main crop as their mainstay, say what countries like Chile do with their avocado, is that they have an avocado desk in each of their consulates in many of their customers. If you go to Egypt, perhaps you'll find our consular offering only consulate services, the traditional ones of, passport and, connections. But nobody specifically sent to ensure that they handle key issues. The same can be said of Sudan, just next door, and Pakistan and the rest. So there's an investment that government must put in.
Yeah.
This is a sector that has sustained this country for quite a long time. Therefore, it is time that also government returns the favor by investing in this particular sector, because many of these things that are included in the bill are aspirational. It's not something that you achieve today and by change of law you believe that they'll have turned the wheel. By the way, the other reason also why we are proposing that all teas must go to the auction is that government doesn't get value for money also in terms of multinationals and the private players. They underdeclare the cost of the tea that they are selling, because this is somebody who will return forms from Dubai and say, by the way, that tea that we processed, it was X amount and we sold it for $1.
Wow.
Government has no way of finding out, because they don't have representation in the places where they sell this tea. But if you force everybody to go to the auction, number one, the public benefits, because you cannot sell their tea at $2 and come and tell them that you sold it at $1.75, and also the government in form of taxes. There is something we may need to tinker on, maybe for the private players, but let us, first of all, like we had said, let us test this model even for 2, 3 or 4 months, ensure that we weed off the bad habits of exploiting farmers. Then we can listen to the demands of the market. If there will be extreme need to open the window for a slightly small percentage. Like 10, 15 years ago, the only tea that used to be sold off auction wasn't more than 5% of our tea. As we speak right now, we are getting to almost 30-35% of the tea produced locally being sold off the auction, which is not a very good indication.
Okay. We want to thank you very much, Senator Aaron Cheruiyot from Kericho County, and Irungu Nyakera, who is the chair of the tea sector lobby. Thank you very much for joining us today, and it's a good step that the country has taken towards the tea sector reforms. Like you've said, it's about time now that you start engaging the farmers and stakeholders for them to understand the immediate, medium and long-term benefits of this and how to take advantage of the new regulations and the new law, and also to deal with the other stakeholders who are disgruntled but they still play a key role in this sector. Asanteni sana and have a good day.
You too. Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.